Be me, Catherine. 35 years old, married to Jack for 8 years. Constantly educating Jack about how relationships should work in modern society. 3 years ago, decided Jack was taking me for granted. He'd come home from his engineering job expecting dinner and affection like some 1950s housewife fantasy. Time to teach him a lesson about appreciation and emotional labor. Started with holding physical intimacy completely. Told myself this was about establishing boundaries and demanding respect. Jack, I need you to understand that intimacy isn't just something you're entitled to. Relationships require emotional investment and recognition of my contributions. He looked confused, but I pressed on. I do the mental load of managing our household while you just coast through life. Until you start truly appreciating what I bring to this marriage, things need to change. Jack tried to argue, but I shut it down. This isn't about punishment, it's about creating a more equitable dynamic. When you start treating me like an equal partner instead of a domestic service provider, we can revisit physical intimacy. Felt powerful watching him realize I was serious. Finally taking control of the relationship narrative. First few months, Jack kept trying to initiate conversations about it. Catherine, I don't understand what you want from me. I work 40 hours a week. I help with dishes. I listen when you talk about your day. Rolling my eyes at his obtuseness. Jack, it's not about specific tasks. It's about the underlying power structure. You assume I'll always be available for your physical needs while you put zero effort into understanding my emotional reality. I'm not your personal intimacy dispenser. Watching his face get red with frustration. That's not how I see you, Catherine. That's completely unfair. Unfair. What's unfair is 8 years of me being the one who remembers anniversaries, manages our social calendar, thinks about home, improvements. You live in this house like a guest who occasionally does dishes. Jack standing there, clenching his fists. So your solution is to just cut off all physical connection? For how long? Until you demonstrate genuine growth and appreciation. This isn't about time limits, Jack. It's about fundamental change. Felt vindicated watching him struggle with the concept. He was finally being forced to confront his privilege. Months turned into a year. Jack became increasingly angry during our discussions. Catherine, this is insane. We're married. This isn't how marriages work. You're holding our entire relationship hostage over some imaginary scorekeeping. His voice getting louder, more desperate. It's not imaginary, Jack. It's the reality of emotional labor that women carry. I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm establishing healthy boundaries. Maybe if you spent less time feeling entitled to my body and more time actually connecting with me as a person. Jack pacing around the living room like a caged animal. Connecting with you? I've tried talking to you every single day for a year. Every conversation becomes a lecture about how terrible I am as a husband. You won't let me touch you. You barely let me kiss you goodnight. His face completely red now, veins visible in his neck. Physical touch without emotional intimacy is just using someone's body. When you learn to appreciate me for more than what I can provide physically, then we can discuss rebuilding that aspect. Right now you're proving my point by getting angry instead of doing self-reflection. Jack punching the wall, leaving a small hole. Self-reflection? I've done nothing but think about this for months. You've turned our marriage into some kind of punishment system where you're the judge and jury. I can't say anything right. I can't do anything right. You've decided I'm some kind of oppressive monster and nothing I do matters. Tried to remain calm and educational. Jack, your anger right now is exactly the kind of toxic masculinity that makes intimacy impossible. Instead of listening and learning, you're getting violent and aggressive. This is why women need to protect themselves by setting firm boundaries. Watching him storm out of the room. Second year was more of the same. Jack stopped trying to initiate physical contact entirely. Started working late more often. When he was home, he was quiet, distant. Exactly the kind of sulking behavior that proved my point about male emotional immaturity. Tried to explain to him during one of our kitchen conversations. Jack, I can see you're withdrawing, which shows you still don't understand the assignment. Healthy relationships require both partners to grow and evolve. Your reaction to my boundaries proves you were only interested in what you could get from me. Jack slamming his coffee mug down on the counter. What I could get from you? Catherine, we're supposed to be partners. Partners support each other. They don't punish each other for imaginary crimes. You've created this entire fantasy where I'm some kind of oppressor. His hands shaking with rage. It's not a fantasy, Jack. It's pattern recognition. You've spent 8 years in a comfortable bubble where your needs came first. I'm simply refusing to enable that dynamic anymore. If you can't handle being in a relationship with an equal, maybe we're not compatible. Jack staring at me like I was speaking another language. Equal? You've made yourself the sole arbiter of our entire relationship. You decide what counts as appreciation. You decide what counts as emotional labor. I have no say in anything, including my own marriage. You talk about equality while treating me like a problem to be solved, his voice echoing through the house. Jack, you're being dramatic. I'm asking for basic respect and recognition. The fact that you experience equality as oppression says everything about how privileged your previous position was. Watching him pace back and forth. When you're accustomed to being centered in everything, fairness feels like an attack. Jack stopping dead in his tracks, staring directly at me. Centered in everything? Catherine, I can't even exist in my own home without being wrong. I can't express frustration without being accused of toxic masculinity. I can't ask for basic human connection without being called entitled. You've made me into a villain in my own life. Year 3, Jack barely spoke to me unless necessary. He'd come home, eat dinner silently, watch TV, go to bed. Occasionally, I'd try to engage him in conversation about his attitude. Jack, this silent treatment is passive-aggressive and manipulative. If you want to discuss rebuilding our connection, I'm open to that. Jack looking up from his dinner with dead eyes. Discuss what exactly, Catherine? How I need to change more? How I need to appreciate you more while you give me nothing in return? You've spent 3 years telling me I'm fundamentally flawed as a husband and a person. What exactly is there to discuss? There's your personal growth to discuss. The ways you could demonstrate that you value me beyond just physical access. I'm not giving you nothing, Jack. I'm giving you the opportunity to become a better partner. Most women would have just left instead of investing this much energy in education. Jack's fork clattering onto his plate. Education? You think you've been educating me? You've been punishing me for 3 years for crimes you invented in your head. You've decided I'm guilty of some kind of original sin of being male and married to you. Standing up so fast his chair falls backward. Jack, your anger is proving my point about male fragility. Instead of doing the internal work to understand your privilege, you're having an emotional outburst. This is exactly why intimacy felt unsafe for me in the first place. You're demonstrating that you see conflict resolution as dominance and submission. Jack standing there, breathing heavily for a full minute. Catherine, I'm done. I'm completely done with this insanity. You want to talk about education? You've taught me that I married someone who sees me as an enemy. Walking toward the stairs without looking back, didn't think much of it at first. Jack had stormed off plenty of times over the past 3 years. Usually he'd cool down and we'd eventually have another conversation about his need for growth. Figured this was just another cycle in his learning process. Gave him space to process his emotions. Few weeks later, Jack seemed different. Not angry anymore, just calm and distant. Almost businesslike when he spoke to me. Catherine, we need to talk tonight when you get home from work. Something in his tone made me slightly nervous, but I assumed he was ready to discuss compromise. Came home that evening expecting maybe he'd finally understood what I was trying to teach him. Found Jack sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of him. Looked official, like tax documents or insurance paperwork. What's all this about? Jack looking up at me with completely flat expression. These are divorce papers, Catherine. I filed yesterday. World stopping completely. Excuse me? Sure, I'd misheard him. I'm divorcing you. I've retained an attorney and started the legal process. Pushing the papers toward me across the table. You'll need to get your own lawyer. Heart pounding, this had to be some kind of negotiation tactic. Jack, this is ridiculous. You can't be serious. Jack standing up, still completely calm. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I'm done being married to someone who despises me. I'm done living like a prisoner in my own home. I'm done being punished for existing, rushing around the table toward him. Jack, wait, let's talk about this. You're clearly having some kind of emotional crisis. This is obviously a reaction to our conversation about boundaries and growth. We can work through this together. Jack stepping away from me. Work through what, Catherine? 3 more years of you explaining why I'm terrible? 3 more years of being told that wanting basic affection from my wife makes me an oppressor. 3 more years of walking on eggshells while you lecture me about my privilege? His voice still eerily calm. Jack, you're mischaracterizing everything. I've been trying to help our relationship grow into something more equitable. This extreme reaction shows you're not ready for the emotional maturity that real partnership requires. Running away to lawyers instead of doing the work is exactly the kind of avoidance I was trying to address. Jack actually laughing, but not in a good way. Running away? Catherine, I've spent 3 years trying to figure out what you wanted from me. I read books about emotional labor. I started therapy. I examined every aspect of my behavior. I bent over backward trying to become whoever you decided I needed to be. And nothing was ever enough because the game was rigged from the start. Realizing he might actually be serious about this. Jack, you're throwing away 8 years of marriage because you can't handle being asked to grow. This is exactly the kind of fragile masculinity that made boundaries necessary in the first place. You'd rather blow up our entire life than do the internal work to become a better partner. Jack's calm facade starting to crack. Better partner? Catherine, I haven't been allowed to be a partner for 3 years. You turned me into some kind of probationary tenant in my own marriage. Every word I said was wrong. Every action was evidence of my inadequacy. You created an impossible standard and then acted surprised when I couldn't meet it. There's nothing impossible about basic respect and appreciation, Jack. Other men manage to evolve beyond patriarchal entitlement. The fact that you're choosing divorce over personal development says everything about your character. You'd rather destroy our family than examine your own behavior. Jack's voice getting louder again. Examine my behavior? What about your behavior, Catherine? What about 3 years of withholding affection to manipulate me? What about turning every conversation into a lecture about how terrible I am? What about making me feel like a monster for wanting to feel loved by my own wife? Jack, I never withheld affection. I established boundaries around intimacy. There's a difference between manipulation and requiring emotional safety. If you can't understand that distinction, then you're proving exactly why those boundaries were necessary. Watching his face get red again, Jack picking up one of the legal documents. Emotional safety? Catherine, you made me feel emotionally unsafe every single day. You criticized everything I did, questioned every motive I had. You turned our home into a hostile environment where I was constantly under surveillance. Then you call it boundaries when I finally say I'm done, realizing I needed to take control of this situation. Jack, you're clearly having some kind of breakdown. This divorce threat is just another attempt to manipulate me into backing down, but I'm not going to be intimidated into abandoning my principles. If you want to work on our marriage, I'm still willing to guide you through that process. Jack staring at me for a long moment. Guide me? Catherine, you still don't get it. This isn't a negotiation or a threat. I don't want to work on our marriage anymore. I want out of it completely. Feeling panic starting to set in. Jack, you can't just give up on 8 years together. Marriage requires commitment and perseverance through difficult periods. This is obviously a reaction to being challenged to grow beyond your comfort zone. We can find a counselor who can help you process these feelings. Jack shaking his head. A counselor? Catherine, I've been in therapy for 2 years trying to figure out how to be good enough for you. My therapist finally helped me realize that nothing I do will ever be good enough. Because you don't want a partner, you want a project. You want someone you can constantly improve and lecture. That's completely unfair, Jack. I want an equal partner who contributes emotionally to our relationship. The fact that you interpret that as wanting a project shows how much work you still need to do. This divorce filing is just another way of avoiding accountability. Jack gathering up the papers. Avoiding accountability? Catherine, I'm taking the ultimate accountability. I'm admitting that I can't be the husband you want me to be. I'm freeing both of us from this toxic cycle. You can find someone who enjoys being constantly corrected and criticized. Following him toward the stairs. Jack, this is insane. You're destroying our life over a temporary rough patch. All couples go through periods where they need to recalibrate the relationship dynamic. You're giving up right when we were starting to make real progress. I was beginning to see some genuine growth in your understanding. Jack stopping at the bottom of the stairs. Progress? Catherine, what progress? I've been miserable for 3 years. I've felt unwanted, unappreciated, and constantly attacked. If that's your definition of progress, then we have completely different goals. Desperate now, realizing he might actually go through with this. Jack, I know it's been challenging, but that's how real change happens. You can't expect to overcome decades of socialized male privilege without some discomfort. I've been patient and supportive throughout your learning process. This reaction shows you're right on the verge of a breakthrough. Jack turning back toward me. patient and supportive, Catherine, you've been cold and judgmental for 3 years. You've withheld love and affection while demanding constant emotional labor from me. You've made me feel like a failure as a husband while offering nothing in return. That's not teaching, that's cruelty. Jack, you're being dramatic and manipulative. I've never been cruel to you. I've been honest about my needs. The fact that you experience honesty as cruelty shows how much privilege you're accustomed to. Women have been accommodating male fragility for centuries. Jack's voice reaching a roar. Male fragility? Catherine, I'm a human being who wanted to feel loved by his wife. I'm a person who tried for 3 years to meet impossible standards. I'm someone who deserves basic kindness and respect in his own home. And you turned all of that into evidence of my inadequacy as a man, trying to stay calm and rational. Jack, you're proving my point about male emotional volatility right now. This is exactly the kind of aggressive behavior that makes women feel unsafe. Instead of listening to my perspective, you're trying to intimidate me with volume and anger. This is why boundaries became necessary in the first place. Jack suddenly going completely quiet, standing there breathing heavily for several minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You're never going to get it, are you, Catherine? You're going to turn this into another lesson about my failures. Jack, I'm trying to help you understand why your reaction is counterproductive. If you could just step back and examine your behavior patterns, you might see how this emotional outburst proves everything I've been trying to teach you. There's still time to learn from this moment. Jack walking back toward the kitchen table, picking up the divorce papers again. Catherine, these papers are real. My lawyer is real. My decision is real. This isn't a learning moment, it's an ending. Following him back to the kitchen. Jack, you can't end an 8-year marriage because you're uncomfortable with personal growth. This is exactly the kind of running away that men do when confronted with emotional responsibility. You're choosing the easy path instead of doing the hard work of becoming a better person. Jack signing one of the documents right in front of me. The easy path? Catherine, leaving you is the hardest thing I've ever done. I loved you more than anything in the world. But you convinced me that my love was just entitlement and oppression. You taught me that wanting you was evidence of my moral failure. Watching him sign paper after paper. Jack, that's not what I taught you. I taught you that love requires respect and emotional investment. You're choosing to interpret that as rejection instead of invitation to growth. This is exactly the kind of binary thinking that perpetuates relationship dysfunction. Jack looking up from the papers. Catherine, do you hear yourself right now? I'm telling you that I'm in pain and you're lecturing me about dysfunction. I'm explaining that you've broken my heart and you're correcting my interpretation. Even now, even in this moment, you can't just be human with me. Realizing I needed a different approach. Jack, I can see that you're hurting. But this pain is part of the growth process. Breaking through old patterns is always uncomfortable. If you can push through this resistance, we could have the relationship we've always wanted. Jack standing up with the signed papers. The relationship we've always wanted? Catherine, I wanted the relationship we had. I wanted to feel desired and appreciated by my wife. I wanted to come home to someone who was happy to see me. I wanted partnership, not constant evaluation. Jack, what you wanted was comfort and complacency. You wanted me to enable patterns that were unhealthy for both of us. Reals. Partnership requires constant work and examination. You're choosing familiar dysfunction over healthy challenge. Jack walking toward the front door with his papers. Catherine, I'm staying at my brother's place starting tonight. My lawyer will contact yours about the details. We can divide up belongings later when emotions aren't so high. Hand on the doorknob, rushing after him. Jack, wait, you're making a huge mistake. This is exactly the kind of impulsive decision-making that I've been trying to help you overcome. You're choosing immediate gratification over long-term relationship success. Don't throw away everything we've built together. Jack pausing at the door. Everything we built? Catherine, what exactly have we built in the last 3 years? We built resentment, we built distance, we built walls. We built a relationship where one person does all the judging and the other does all the failing. That's not a marriage, that's a project. Jack, you're being incredibly selfish right now. Marriage is about more than just your personal comfort. It's about commitment and working through challenges together. You're abandoning that commitment because growth feels hard. Jack opening the door. Selfish? Catherine, what about 3 years of you putting your agenda above our relationship? What about you deciding unilaterally that our entire dynamic needed to change? What about you withholding love until I became the person you wanted me to be? If anyone's been selfish here, it's not me. Standing in the doorway as he walked to his car. Jack, this is exactly the kind of victim mentality that keeps men from taking responsibility. You're rewriting our entire history to avoid acknowledging your need for growth. Running away isn't going to solve your underlying issues with emotional intimacy. Shouting now as he got in his car, Jack rolling down his window. Catherine, my issue isn't with emotional intimacy. My issue is with being emotionally abused by someone who calls it education. My issue is with being punished for 3 years for loving someone who decided love wasn't enough. My issue is with wasting the best years of my life, trying to earn basic kindness from my own wife. Watching him back out of the driveway. Jack, you'll regret this decision when you've had time to process everything rationally. You're going to realize that I was the only person willing to help you become your best self. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've thrown away. Jack pausing before driving away. Catherine, the only thing I regret is not doing this 2 years ago. I regret letting you convince me that wanting to feel loved made me a bad person. I regret believing that your cruelty was actually kindness. But I'll never regret getting my self-respect back, standing in my empty driveway as his car disappeared. Couldn't believe he'd actually gone through with it. This was obviously just a dramatic gesture to get my attention. Probably figured I'd panic and abandon my principles. He'd be back within a week once he realized how good he had it. Spent the next few days calling and texting. Left messages explaining that I was willing to work with him on a reconciliation plan. Told him we could establish some new ground rules that might feel more comfortable for him. Offered to find a marriage counselor who could help him process his resistance to change. Jack never responded to any of my calls or messages. His brother Marcus started answering his phone. Catherine, Jack doesn't want to talk to you right now. He's asked me to tell you that all communication should go through the lawyers. He's serious about this divorce. Marcus, this is obviously just a reaction to being challenged to grow. Jack has always struggled with emotional regulation when he feels criticized. I know he's hurting, but running away isn't going to solve anything. Maybe you could help him see that this is just another opportunity for development. Marcus getting quiet for a moment. Catherine, I've watched my brother become a shell of himself over the past 3 years. I've listened to him agonize over what was wrong with him that his own wife didn't want him. I've seen him blame himself for every problem in your marriage. Honestly, I'm proud of him for finally standing up for himself. Marcus, you don't understand the full context of our situation. Jack has been resistant to examining some problematic patterns in our relationship dynamic. I've been trying to help him develop more emotional intelligence and awareness. His decision to run to divorce instead of doing the work shows exactly why intervention was necessary. Marcus's voice getting harder. Problematic patterns? Catherine, the only pattern I saw was you tearing him down constantly. Every time I talked to him, it was about something else he was doing wrong. You had him convinced that being a normal husband made him some kind of oppressor. That's not helping someone grow, that's destroying them. Realizing Jack had been manipulating his family's perception. Marcus, Jack is obviously presenting a very one-sided version of events. Healthy relationships require both partners to examine their behavior and make changes. I've been willing to do that work, but Jack has been resistant to feedback. This divorce filing is just an extreme avoidance tactic. Marcus laughing bitterly. Avoidance tactic. Catherine, he tried for 3 years to make you happy. He read every book you suggested, went to therapy, changed everything about himself. And you still treated him like he was fundamentally flawed. At some point, enough is enough. Marcus, I never treated Jack like he was flawed. I treated him like he had potential to grow beyond some limiting patterns. The fact that he interpreted support as attack shows exactly how much work he still needs to do. This entire situation proves my point about male fragility and accountability avoidance. Marcus hanging up after that. Tried calling back several times, but he wouldn't answer. Jack had clearly poisoned his family against me, probably painting himself as some kind of victim instead of taking responsibility. Received official papers from Jack's attorney a week later, demanding immediate mediation to discuss asset division. Couldn't believe he was actually moving forward with legal proceedings. This was getting completely out of hand. Called my own lawyer to discuss strategy, explained that Jack was obviously having some kind of emotional breakdown, suggested we request psychological evaluation before proceeding. He's not thinking rationally, and this entire filing is based on temporary emotional instability. My lawyer raising concerns about my approach. Catherine, if your husband has been unhappy for 3 years, this might not be as sudden as you think. Courts don't look favorably on claims that someone is mentally unstable just for filing divorce. We should probably focus on practical matters like property division. But this isn't about genuine incompatibility. This is about Jack refusing to do the emotional work necessary for healthy partnership. He's choosing the nuclear option instead of addressing his issues with intimacy and appreciation. Surely there must be some way to delay proceedings until he's thinking more clearly. Lawyer explaining that no grounds existed for delaying anything. Jack had every right to file for divorce. My only options were to contest specific terms or try mediation. Catherine, I understand this is difficult, but we need to prepare for the possibility that this is really happening. Attended the first mediation session expecting Jack to show some remorse. Figured once he saw me in person, he'd realize how much he was giving up. Walked into the conference room, ready to discuss terms for reconciliation. Found Jack sitting with his attorney looking completely calm and resolved. Tried to make eye contact, but he stared straight ahead. Mediator explaining the process while Jack nodded along. When asked about possibility of reconciliation, Jack spoke clearly. There's no possibility of reconciliation. I want to proceed with dissolution as quickly as possible. Interrupting the mediator. Jack, surely you want to at least discuss what led us to this point. We've been together for 8 years. We can't just throw that away without examining what went wrong. Maybe we could establish some new guidelines that address both of our concerns. Jack speaking without looking at me. Catherine, I don't want to examine anything with you anymore. I don't want guidelines or discussions or educational opportunities. I want to divide our assets and end this marriage. His voice completely emotionless, trying to reach him on a human level. Jack, I can see you're still angry, but this is a permanent decision based on temporary emotions. We could take a break from each other while you process your feelings. But divorce should be a last resort, not the first response to relationship challenges. Jack finally looking directly at me. Catherine, you still think this is about my feelings. You still think this is some kind of therapeutic moment. This isn't about processing or growing or learning. This is about me choosing not to live this way anymore. Mediator redirecting us back to practical matters. Discussion of house ownership, bank accounts, retirement funds. Jack agreeing to split everything 50-50 without argument. Just wanted to get through the process as efficiently as possible. After the session, tried to catch Jack in the parking lot. Jack, wait, can we please just talk for 5 minutes without lawyers present? I feel like we're not communicating effectively in that formal environment. Maybe we could get coffee and actually discuss what's really happening here. Jack stopping, but not turning around. Catherine, what's really happening is that I filed for divorce and you can't accept it. You keep waiting for me to change my mind or realize I made a mistake. But the only mistake I made was waiting this long. Walking away toward his car, calling after him desperately. Jack, you're going to regret this when you realize what you're giving up. You're going to miss having someone who actually cared enough to help you grow. Most women would have just left instead of investing 3 years in your development. Jack pausing at his car door. Catherine, you didn't invest in my development. You invested in your fantasy of who you wanted me to become. And when I couldn't become that person, you decided I was defective. That's not love. That's narcissism. Standing alone in the parking lot, watching him drive away again. Couldn't understand how things had gotten so twisted around. Everything I'd done had been about improving our relationship. Jack was choosing to interpret love and support as something negative. Spent weeks trying to process what had gone wrong. Clearly Jack had been more damaged by his upbringing than I'd realized. His inability to accept feedback and growth opportunities showed deep-seated issues with authority and self-improvement. Probably needed individual therapy before he could be ready for partnership. Divorce finalized 3 months later. Jack never wavered in his decision. Never asked to work things out. Never acknowledged that maybe he'd overreacted. Just signed papers and moved on like 8 years meant nothing. Sitting in my empty house afterward, couldn't believe Jack had actually followed through with destroying our life together. All because he couldn't handle being asked to examine his behavior and grow as a person. Exactly the kind of fragile male ego response that proved every point I'd been trying to make. He'd rather be alone than do the emotional work required for real partnership. Would probably end up with someone who enabled all his worst patterns. Someone who asked for nothing and expected nothing. Someone who would never challenge him to become his best self. Realized I'd probably been too advanced in my thinking for where Jack was in his personal development. Maybe someday he'd look back and appreciate what I'd been trying to give him. Maybe he'd realize that having someone care enough to demand growth was actually a gift. Maybe he'd understand that I'd been the only person willing to see his potential, but for now, he was choosing the easy path. Choosing comfort over growth. Choosing stagnation over evolution, proving exactly why someone needed to challenge him in the first place. Jack was going to spend the rest of his life wondering what he'd thrown away. Going to realize that finding someone willing to invest in his development was rare. Going to miss having a partner who saw beyond his current limitations. Going to regret choosing divorce over doing the work. Meanwhile, I'd learned valuable lessons about male fragility and resistance to change. Seen firsthand how quickly men abandon relationship when asked to evolve. Understood better why so many marriages fail when women refuse to settle for less than they deserve. Gained insight into the depths of male entitlement and avoidance. Jack could have his divorce. Could have his freedom from accountability. Could have his life without anyone challenging him to grow. But he'd lost the best thing that ever happened to him. And deep down, he knew it.